Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the patch notes for patch 10.2. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It does help out a ton. Check out the rest of the content on the channel as well. We're going to be doing a fresh tier list for this patch. We have a coaching playlist session, guides for individual champions, topical guides. And we stream every night starting around 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually going till about 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube. It's a very friendly, chill community, so come by, check it out. I try to be as conversational as possible, so I explain what I'm doing in the game, and I try to field as many questions as I can from the chat while I'm playing. So come by, check it out. It's a good time. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So they're coming out with some new skins. Okay, whatever. It looks like the Wukong is not being released on this patch. I had thought on the PBE that Wukong was coming out, but it appears there's no Wukong in this patch. So maybe next patch, we'll see. Okay, so I'm going to kick it off with Aphelios here. And a lot of these were previewed on the PBE. I talked about them on stream several times. I did end up doing a video like last week at some point, but I just never ended up releasing it. I was just so busy, and then I just forgot to release it at some point, talking about a lot of the stuff on the PBE, but whatever. We'll go ahead and do it here. I am going to try during the off weeks when there's not a patch just to talk about what's on the PBE, just to kind of keep people up to date with what's going on over at Riot, what they're thinking about. But anyways, let's jump in here. Okay, so Aphelios has been nerfed several times since release. I think almost literally every patch he's received some kind of nerf. It might actually be every patch. If it's not every patch, it's been very close. So what are the newest rounds of nerfs? Well, with Calibrum, they are nerfing the damage from 20 to 40 down to a flat 15 with a 0.2 bonus attack. So that's a lot, I feel like. It's levels 1 to 9. Yeah, so that's quite a lot, I think. It's 25 damage per hit off, which is a lot. I mean, 25 on-hit damage is, it's like, was it 20, I think it's 25 gold each. So that's what, like 625 gold value. So that's a lot of gold value. And then the scaling is also really far off. Basic attack, mark damage, okay. And then the cooldown is also increased. The Q cooldown is also increased a certain amount. So that's going to take quite a bit of damage off of him. And I think this is one of... I'm not an Aphelios expert, but I think this is going to take some damage, some big damage off his team fight. I feel like he almost always tries to use Calibrum and the Flamethrower in fights. They've nerfed the Flamethrower several times, but... Either way, pretty big hit, especially to kind of his early game poke. Okay, Crescendum... So it goes, it's losing 30% of your total attack damage when all of the chakrams go in. Okay, so that's a pretty good hit to his damage. And then the total burst damage on his Q, if he hits somebody with all of them, it's going to be pretty significant. Hey, thanks for the sub. I appreciate it. Turn that up a little bit. So overall, pretty good hit to him. I'm not entirely sure. Like I said, I'm not an expert on it, but it's certainly not good. It's going to bring him down some. And his win rate was already not that great. If we check out his win rate here, he is the most banned by far. But he's still under 50%. Now, just because something's under 50% doesn't mean that it can't be strong, okay? So most of the champions that people have considered overpowered over the last year have been under 50% for a long time, especially stuff that's in pro that's considered really good, right? So like Akali, Irelia, when she was really good for a while. I think Aatrox was around 50% mostly. Oh, that's not under ADCs. Let me pull it up under all here. So even if we just select win percentage here and drag down, like Akali's down there, she's still getting like some more massive nerfs on the next patch. You know, Tom Kench is basically pick banned in pro right now as support. Yumi is still pretty good in support. Irelia can still be really good in the right hands. Ryze can still be really good. Qiyana, who they're nerfing again on this patch, has 47%. So, you know, sometimes people use that justification. I've heard Freak in some of his patch notes, and I love Freak. Let me preface by saying that. But sometimes he'll say, oh, you don't need to ban something, or it's not good anymore because it's under a 50% win rate. You got to be really careful with that kind of statistical reasoning, because that doesn't cover, like, the one tricks, right? Or the people that are really good on that champion. So sometimes you just can't risk it. You know, if someone's really good on a champ, especially when you start to get to those higher elo brackets, then it could just take over the game. So you have to try to, you know, pick your bans around the top case scenario, or that's definitely a viable strategy. So it's like, you know, if you're in solo queue, for example, do you really need to ban Singed every game? Do you need to ban Taric every game? Or would you feel much better, you know, occasionally banning something like an Akali, banning something like, who else down here is kind of a solo queue menace, even like a Qiyana, or Yasuo, wherever he is. Yeah, Yasuo's at 48%, still a super popular ban. So, anyways, I think it is going to hurt him some. I think people will still probably ban him, but I think, honestly, I feel like he's close to being in an okay spot. So he still might be really dangerous. We'll see. But they needed to nerf him again for high elo, I think. But this is probably about right, or it might be a little bit too much. We'll see. Okay, Draven, they are giving him a little bit more, like, not even flat damage, just scaling bonus damage on his R. This is not what he needs. Now, to be fair, I don't think Draven is, like, that bad right now, so it's kind of dangerous to buff him. I think they could have buffed his utility a little bit, maybe lower the cooldown on his stand aside. I really like those changes when they do those to ADCs. They did that to Jinx a lot instead of giving her raw numbers. They just increased her utility. Like, they buffed her Chompers a couple of times. They buffed her Zap. And I like them doing that with ADCs that are already have, like, pretty good scaling or pretty good presence. Just to give them a bit more, like, a bit more defense or a bit more playmaking potential. So I would like to have seen that, like, just maybe lower the cooldown on his stand aside or something, or like maybe increase the movement speed a little bit on his W, or make it last a little bit longer. Just something like that would have been nice. So I don't know. He's fallen pretty far, honestly. He's fallen pretty far on this patch, because usually he's almost always 51 or 52, because he's a heavily one-tricked champion, right? Like, there are very few people that just randomly play Draven, right? Like, it's always somebody that really plays a lot of Draven. And so usually that boosts his numbers up a lot, as it typically does with one tricks. Do they have a... It'd be interesting if they had a metric of how many people that play him are one tricks. I don't know if they do or not in their kind of deeper stats here. World win rate. Yeah, I don't... Some site might have that information. I don't know. I'll have to research and see. If you know, if there is a site that says that, like how many... I don't know how they would measure one tricks. Like, how many people have... Or what's the... I guess you would look at what's the average number of games played by people who play this champion. Or by, like, people who pick this champion. And that would show you... does it say average game? So pick rate... 6%. Yeah, you would want to look for a stat that shows average numbers of games played by someone who plays that champion. But either way, I don't think this is going to matter that much. I think what's happening with Draven right now is he's not that great at team fights. There are a lot of team fights going on in the game. You know, people are fighting over dragons, rifts. It's just, a lot of the game is about mobility and about team fights. And that's why you're seeing in pro play even things like Rumble in the mid lane, who's like an extreme case of a team fighter. And of course with the supports, you're often seeing things like Nautilus and Leona, like really good team fight champs. So, and Misfortune, of course, is sort of the premier, like the go-to team fight ADC, being very popular in pro. So I think that's just what it is that there are other champions that have emerged as being similar lane bullies, like Misfortune, like Jhin, and he just doesn't do enough in team fights. So I think that's what it is. And he doesn't have great wave clear either early on. Like, it's single target with his axes. He does last hit really well, and he does naturally push the wave, but that might be another thing, is he doesn't have great wave control because he kind of has to push if he wants to keep his axes spinning. So maybe that's the thing too, is that he can get ganked and camped a lot easier than most other ADCs because he can't control the wave very well. but that's always been the case. So I don't really know. I do think I expect him to actually go up a little bit on this patch, not necessarily because of this buff, but because of the nerfs to critical strike, which we'll talk about here in a second. Which sounds kind of odd. Like, wait a minute, he does get crit, true, but he usually gets Bloodthirster first. So I think that's going to make him a lot stronger on single item than some of the other popular champs right now. So it'll boost him up a little bit. So I would expect him to move up maybe a percentage point on this patch, even though I don't think it's going to be because of this change. I think it'll be more of a meta change type of thing. But anyways, he also doesn't have any like chain CC, which is another thing. So like if you have a Leona or a Nautilus, just having somebody that can chain CC with you is nice. Like he's got stand aside, but it's not the same as Misfortune's E, which can hold people in place forever, or like an Ashe arrow, which I don't think Ashe is that great in this meta, but like maybe a Varus ult, a Jhin W. It's just his CC's lacking, his wave clear's lacking, and his team fighting's lacking. Although he does have really good snowball potential, and he does have great early game single target damage. So, okay, Jinx. So, whenever Jinx damages enemy champions, turrets, or inhibitors, and they die, any champions, turrets, inhibitors, or epic monsters that her team kills within 3 seconds. Okay, so basically she can trigger this off of dragons, is where this is going to be most relevant. If a team tries to come and contest you at dragon, your team gets the dragon, then you get your passive is going to trigger, and you can start fights. So I don't think this is going to be a massive deal for her win rate, but it's a nice quality of life. I mean, she might get 0.5% off of this. Dragons are falling quite a bit. They do die easier, and they do come up faster than they used to, so it definitely will be very relevant in some situations. Okay, Karma. Now, this is a curious change for Karma in my mind, because the real like problem with Karma over the years is they try to keep her out of solo lanes because they feel like she can be very oppressive in solo lanes because she can get really cheap items. And that's always a problem when you have a support that can get played somewhere in non-support lanes. So the fact that Karma can, you know, run mid or something like that and still get Athenes, still get Ardent Censer, along with a couple of other things, allows her to cheat the power curve because those items are so cheap in terms of gold, which allows her to team fight faster. So that's been a real issue with her. Now, a big problem with why she was nerfed so hard last spring was the fact that she could use Klepto top. And she's a really, like, annoying champion to deal with in the top lane. Like, a couple of tank items on her, like maybe an Iceborne Gauntlet or a Spirit Visage or something, and then just a bunch of utility items, and she can be a pretty oppressive team fighter. I never honestly thought she was that big of a deal, but she's really annoying to go against. I think part of that is her Focus Resolve gives so much healing, so it seems strange to me that they would just flat out buff her base damage on her stuff, because that kind of encourages solo lane activity. I mean, that's good for support, but that's also good for solo lane. So if they were just trying to buff support Karma, I would have buffed the movement speed like they did back in spring. I think they could bring that back. That made her feel really good as support and gave her a unique niche, which is where she can hand out movement speed for long periods of time to her team and gives her superior engage. So if they're worried that's OP, I would just nerf the healing on Focus Resolve in the top lane so that people could all-in her better. So nerf it to where she doesn't get a total of 40% of her HP back off of Empowered W, but rather that she would get like 30% back or something like that. There's a lot of Grievous Wounds effects out there too right now. You know, Kled has one built into his kit, and a lot of top lane champions are AD, and they could just build like an Executioner's, and that would help a lot with her Empowered W. So I would, if I was Riot's Balance team, I would give her back the movement speed, make it the 2.5 seconds instead of the 1.5 that it is right now. Maybe they could even compromise and say it's 2 seconds instead of 1.5 seconds. That would help. But that really solidified her niche. Now, she did go up to a 55% win rate when that happened, so that, you know, she was strong. But I think part of that were other factors going on, like Kleptomancy at the time, so we'll see. I feel like Karma, she's always sort of dangerous to tinker with, because not only is she a menace in top and mid lane, but there have been metas in the past in push, poke, heavy early game metas, which is sort of what we're in right now, where she has been really oppressive. And she's one of the few ranged enchanters that has been played consistently in pro play in certain metas. There's like 1 or 2 seasons where it was like Karma Ezreal or Karma Caitlyn almost every game. So she's a dangerous one. tinker with. But I like that she's getting the changes. I think that she is a fun, interesting champion. Basically, she's really strong early game, but she gets outscaled late because they nerfed a lot of the scaling on her empowered R in team fights, and they nerfed the, well, they didn't, they reverted the buff to the movement speed, which was really good on her. So, we'll see how it goes. She doesn't have a great win rate overall, but once again, you got to be careful with that because sometimes very small changes. I think before they changed that movement speed thing, I feel like she was like 48%, and then she went to 55% on like one patch. So some of these champions that seem like they're kind of low, just very small tweaks can move the needle a lot on those champions. So we'll see. But yeah, overall good. I like it. It'll help support Karma. I don't know. What's her win rate in top lane? Let me see. About the same. Yeah, it's probably a good idea. So 10 more damage at all ranks, and then 10 more damage on her W at all ranks. Now keep in mind this W hits twice, so that's going to be 20 more damage. So in an all-in, that's going to give her 30 more damage. So pretty good. All right. Now do I think she's going to be top tier? Probably not. Although maybe this will make her more viable in certain comps. If you have like a Run Atom comp, like a Darius or an Olaf or something like that, maybe you use her as sort of your speed monster champion. You can do that also with like a Zillion or a Sona. Sona's also getting buffs on this patch, but this is a good patch for supports. There are several like underloved enchanters that are getting buffed here. Okay, so Lulu's getting some marginal stat increases, like 1 more armor, half an attack damage, just for round numbers. I don't know why they don't just round all of the numbers to all champions up, just for clean numbers. Like, whoever thought of this? Like, okay, let's make her attack damage 46.368. I don't know. I guess only a coder can love a number like that, but anyways, very small base stat changes. The E change is okay. Lulu is just like a perpetual champion that's going to be under a 50% win rate most of the time. And people ask me on stream, why is Lulu like not that good? And I've tried Lulu. I like Lulu. I like her kit for the most part. I think it's interesting. I think she's fairly unique. And I've tried to make her work over the years. I really have. But she has been my lowest performing enchanter that I've tried to play on a consistent basis ever. Pretty much. So, you know, almost every enchanter, whether it's Sona or Nami or Janna or Soraka or whatever, it's, you know, typically been over 50%, right? 52% in bad metas. And some really good, you know, metas, especially with Janna, I've gotten up to, you know, 55% and things like that. For certain, like, windows in, like, a month or two, you know, I've run, like, over 60% over, like, 50 to 100 games on things like Nami or Janna or whatever. Lulu, that's very rare. Sometimes I go on a streak, you know, for a couple of weeks with Lulu, but the big thing that holds her back is that she's mostly single target. And a lot of other enchanters have a lot more multi-target stuff. So if you think about Soraka can just kind of press ult and heal everybody on the map. Janna can heal a lot of her team with her ult. Sona's got all of her auras that she's distributing. Nami's wave can bounce around and hit multiple people. But Lulu, just pretty much everything single target, right? She's got a single target shield, single target ult. And so that's one thing about her that kind of lowers her scaling a little bit. Another thing is that her ultimate is an infusion of health and not a heal. So let me pull up Lulu here. Oh, not that. That's the bad one. There we go. Actually, that's the bad one too. Where's Lulu Wiki? There we go. That's a good one. So the thing about Lulu here, if they change this to a heal, that would actually help her out a lot if this was just a permanent heal and not a temporary buff. Now, there are a couple of things about this. They wanted to make her unique from other champions. It does give bonus health, so basically what that means is that you can heal somebody who's max health to get the knockup benefit. So that's pretty cool, but it doesn't benefit from plus healing and shielding. And that's a huge, huge nerf. It doesn't get anything out of Revitalize. and then nothing out of the stat plus healing and shielding. So when a lot of other enchanters kind of in the mid game are going to have, 30% plus healing and shielding with Revitalize in the mid to late game, she's losing out on that. So not only is she single target, but her biggest single target heal is not actually a heal. So it does get around Grievous Wounds. It's not affected by Grievous Wounds, and it can overheal somebody. So if your Nocturne goes in, you can ult him immediately to get that knock up for the CC, and you're not going to be wasting your heal. He's still going to have the health. It lasts for 7 seconds. They're still going to do damage to him. So I think they should do something around this. That would be a huge help to her. So they could increase the AP ratio. Lulu, like Karma, has solo lane itis, though. There have been metas where Lulu has been strong in the solo lane. Even Faker has played Lulu in mid lane before. So she has been oppressive in those lanes, and she's been nerfed because of that. And that's partially why her AP ratios are so low. If you look at these, you're like, God, these numbers are so low. Look at this. It's like 50%. Like Soraka, if she heals somebody who's low health, it's like 80% AP ratio. It hits 5 targets on your team, right? Lulu, single target 50%? Doesn't benefit from plus healing and shielding? Like, what the hell? So it just feels like her numbers are just so low. Like the scaling, right? Like 60% on a shield. Like, Glitter Lance, 50% damage. Scaling. So she doesn't scale with plus healing and shielding really that well at all. She doesn't really scale with AP that well. She's single target. So that's the stuff that's held her back. And a lot of that is because of the solo lane oppression. So I think, the best thing to do is, there's a couple of things. Number one, they could buff up her ult a little bit. Ways they could do this, make it just a heal, so that it actually scales with plus healing and shielding. They could increase the slow a little bit. They could increase the radius so that it affects more people. 150 radius is so low. That's basically like melee range. They could make that 300 range, and then it would be much more likely, if she uses this on a tank in an engaged situation, that tank's going to be able to slow more people in the fight. So that could be an option. So I think all of those are okay. But the big thing that I would recommend that they do is, with Whimsy, take off the attack speed buff, this 40%, and put that on her shield. Because when you put the shield on somebody, it puts picks on them, naturally. And then the picks, every time they auto-attack, then they're going to do extra damage on that auto. Which is pretty significant. I mean, at number 9, when you're rank 9 here, that's 63 base, pretty much on-hit damage. It's not quite on hit. It doesn't work with Gensu's. You don't get the double damage. But it's basically every attack you're doing that extra damage to that target, unless there's something in the way, like minions can block it or other champions can block it. But it's 63 extra damage per attack. That's really strong. That's very, very good. So she's got that. She's good at buffing up single targets, right? So she's got that ult for single target. She has this Whimsy is really good. And then she can give people... bonus attack speed and bonus movement speed. So all that's solid. But the problem is that the W, there's just too much here. It's the attack speed, it's the movement speed, and it's also the polymorph, which is a really important piece of CC. It's your only really good CC. Like your Glitter Lance, not that great. It's a very small slow that decays by a ton really quickly. Your ult, it's like a 1 second knockup, or not even 1 second, 0.75, which is okay. Once again, if they increase the radius on this to 300, which would be like Alistar radius, whenever he Qs, and they maybe made it a 1 second knockup, that would help a lot. But there's just too much on this, because you have to choose. Do I use my best piece of CC on the enemy? Do I speed up my engaged champion, like the Darius or the Olaf? Or do I put the attack speed on my AD carry? Right? And that's cool that you have choices. The problem is your other abilities are really weak because your W is so strong. So AP buff on ally. It did do that. I forgot it did that. So if you put your E on an ally, it used to give AP as well, which was pretty nice. But yeah, so if they just move the attack speed over here, that makes a lot more sense, right? Now your shield is actually useful. You put it on an ally, it gives them a shield, it gives them picks, and it gives them attack speed to go with the picks. So now it's like, okay, this is a really good sort of buff. and then you would be able to polymorph a lot more often, or you would be able to give the movement speed duration to somebody. So I think that would help out a lot. I don't think that would make her broken. She would still have a lot of the same problems I just talked about, being single target. But this would solidify her as the go-to like single target buff and debuff champion, I think, because now you could single target debuff the enemy for a large amount for the polymorph and single target buff an ally with that shield with the attack speed. So we'll see if they do that. But right now, I don't think this is going to matter that much. Lowering the cooldown is nice, especially early on. They could lower her mana cost if they want to try to make her a better early game bully. That could be interesting. Or they could lower the cooldown on Whimsy. If they want this to be an all-powerful spell, it needs to go from like 12 to 8 seconds instead of 16 to 12. But as is, I don't think it's going to make a huge difference, although it certainly is nice that you can throw up more shields. I mean, that's going to be really good. It's better harassment in lane. It's better shielding in combat. So we'll see. You know, if champions like Kog'Maw come back in or Twitch, those specifically are super good because they benefit so heavily from the attack speed and the on-hit that she hands out. Now, back when Kog'Maw would get Wit's End, that was even better because Pix does magic damage, so lowering their magic resist actually increased Pix damage by a ton. So you might see her with Kog'Maw, you might see her with Twitch, but both of those champions aren't super popular or really strong right now. But we'll see. They are nerfing crit. We'll talk about that here in a second. So maybe we see some Kog'Maw. I doubt it. It's possible, but I doubt it. I think they'd have to buff either Gensu's, Blatherin King, or Wit's End for that to happen. Maybe Twitch, because Twitch is still pretty good, you know, and with the Blatherin King, he could do all right. So maybe in some very specific comps, but in general, I don't think she's going to be that great. Okay, Nautilus, this champion has been really good for a while. I know we have a lot of people that love Nautilus on the channel. I like Nautilus. He probably is my most played tank of all time. It's pretty close. But he just does too much. He's getting played all the time in pro. Let me see. I haven't actually looked at pro stats here. Since the Kespa Cup. I know the Chinese, the LPL have had several tournaments. Okay, 10.1. So this is mostly going to be LPL. So they're banning Akali and Rumble every game, it looks like. Out of, what, 39 games? Qiyana, Mord, Misfortune. Misfortune doesn't have a great win rate. Ironically, a lot of these champs that are getting banned every game, several of them don't have great win rates. Leona and Braum actually look like the two most popular supports. Nautilus is not doing so hot. He's got 69% presence, which means he's picked or banned or 60% of the time, and he's only got a 40% win rate. So people don't like playing against him because he locks them down a lot. He has just a crazy amount of CC. But his win rate's not like that oppressive. It's like 52%. So I feel like a few patches ago, 51%. I feel like a few patches ago, maybe, or like near the end of last season, when he was, you know, clocking in at like 54%, before they nerfed a lot of stuff about tanks in the preseason, that, you know, maybe he needed this. But I don't know. He has been nerfed several times already. They nerfed the damage on his R, which did hit him. And a lot of people are maxing Q. Now, I will say that historically, Emax has been the thing with him, because that gives you much better team fight damage, that gives you better wave clear. It's just a lot more damage in general. So I have always maxed E on him, and most people historically have maxed E on him. But a lot of people have gone to maxing Q. So if you stay with the Q max, this is going to hurt you. It's 10 damage early, and then it goes over to 250 damage later. But I think people could just go back to the E max, and I'm not sure it would even matter. The Q was buffed several times last season, so that's partially why. I think they did end up giving it more damage, was one of the buffs. Let's see. So 9.22, they took off 50 damage off his ult, which was pretty significant. Okay, indicator. So this, yeah, they pretty much Oh, they reduced it on 9/12. Okay, so the base damage used to actually be higher. The staggering blow. So this was when he became a lot stronger. Here. Okay. So on 9/8, this is where Nautilus started catching people's attention a bit more. Was he got buffed from 80 to 240 to 100 to 280. So right now it's going down to 70 to 250. So it's 10 more damage at the top end and 10 less damage at the bottom end from that buff that he got originally. They did give it a huge AP increase, which a lot of people don't build AP on him. This stagger duration is huge too. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but early on, getting that extra quarter of a second root is pretty significant. They increased his armor. The staggering blow cooldown. This is another one. It used to be 9 seconds on the same target. Now it's 6 seconds. So realistically, in a lot of all-ins, you are going to be able to trigger this twice on somebody. Whereas 9 seconds, the fight's usually done by the time you could get it a second time. So that was a pretty big one too. And that was kind of like in recent memory, like last season where they buffed him. They did give him a buff to Titan's Wrath back in 8.16, but he didn't really catch on back then. They lowered the cooldown on his hook significantly back in Season 8. So he's had several buffs over the last season and a half. So they're trying to dial him back a little bit. I still think he'll be pretty good. If you're good on Nautilus, I still think he's going to be pretty strong. Leona might become the de facto choice for a lot of engages. It looks like in pro play, people are liking the Leona a bit more. But he's still going to be solid. This E damage, though, is so much. I mean, if you max this out, like, you can hit 350 damage, AoE all around you, for 350 damage. So I really don't understand. I mean, I guess people are maxing this so they have more chances to land hooks to throw them in. It does, like, I guess do a little bit more burst, but still, like, it's still on a long cooldown. Like, it does cost 60 mana, but I still think that maxing E, I mean, there's a lot of smart people that theorycraft Nautilus that are obviously pro players and coaches and things like that, but I feel like the E is the way to go. I mean, if we're in a team fight meta, right, which we are, like, right, these champions that are popular, the Misfortune, team fight meta, Aphelios with his, like, flamethrower ult, team fights, Leona, Braum, Gragas, Jarvan, like, all of these, the vast majority of these top-end picks are going to be team-fight dominant picks, outside of, like, maybe Lucian and Elise, who are just kind of, like, early-game bullies. Ornn, you know, Nautilus, like, most of these champions are really heavily emphasizing team fights so that people are, you know, contesting dragons more often because those are really important. You know, they're fighting around Rift Herald now because you want to get Rift early because you can potentially get 2 Rifts. So there's a lot of reasons that people are engaging and fighting these team fights much more often. The early game is a little bit slower too, so junglers, you know, can't really dominate. A lot of junglers can't dominate as hard early as they have in the past. It's going to take a couple more levels. So if we're in a team fight meta, to me, you would want to take the team fight skill, which is going to be Riptide. Like, this is nice for starting fights, but it's just not going to do as much in team fights because the cooldown is way longer and it's only single target. And the CC's not that long. Like, you do get a hook to pull somebody in. So, I don't know. I think you just switch back over to Riptide, potentially, because it's still, like, way, way more damage in team fights. Allows you to push, get priority, roam a lot better. It's just the way to go. It does cost a lot more mana, but they are buffing Frozen Heart, which I think will be super good on him, potentially. As it will be on a lot of tanks. So, I think you can just switch over to Riptide, and it's not even a nerf, really. I mean, you'll lose 10 damage off your hook for early game, but if you just switch over max Riptide and then max Titan's Wrath second, and just leave your hook, I think he's going to be really good. It's not like you even need this later on in the game. Like, you have to hit your hook to start a fight. You just press R on somebody, and boom, the fight started. And you're going to 100% hit your hook if you hit your R, right? Unless someone steps in to block your hook. But either way, that's going to happen regardless of what the cooldown is. So I don't think he's a champion where you have to fish for hooks like you would with Blitzcrank or Pyke or a lot of these other champs. You don't have to fish for hooks as much because you have a hard engage. Your ult is going to hit them, you know, unless they have an hourglass or something, it's going to hit them. So I think given that you're basically guaranteed to hit the hook if you want to start a fight anyways. Now, yes, it is nice if you do hit your hook and you hit your hook on one person and then, you have more flexibility with your depth charge to use it on somebody else, but he's not as reliant on the cooldown on his hook in order to start fights, is what I'm saying. So I think and he has a really high damage AoE ability. I mean, 350, even if you're only hitting like 2 people with that, it's like 700 damage on a 5-second cooldown. For a tank, like, it's big. So no other tanks have that kind of potential team fight damage output in the mid and the late game without, building damage items. So I think you just go back to max E here. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I feel like if you just go to max E, it's not even going to matter that much. I think his win rate might actually even go up a little bit because this might scare people off of not playing him as much, because I'm sure a lot of commentators are going to say this is a huge nerf, potentially. So that might open it up where less of the tourists are going to be playing him, the people that are auto-filled or whatever, the non-expert Nautilus people. He might actually get banned a lot less off of this if pros stop playing him as much. So that's really good. If you like Nautilus, this might actually be good because you'll actually get to play him. He may not be banned in 50% of the games. You're not going to have as many amateurs playing him. So I think if people learn about like how strong Frozen Heart is, we'll talk about that here in a second, and they go back to maxing E, I think his win rate could actually go up a little bit on this patch. But we'll see. It could easily go down 0.5%. So this one's kind of up in the air. It depends on how smart people are in adjusting the meta. But overall, I think there's a potential that it could go up, just because of the shift to E, which I think is better anyways, and the Frozen Heart. Okay, so Qiyana, Terra Shape. I think this is going to kill her in the jungle, and I think that's what they're trying to do. That's what they mentioned. They don't really like flex picks that much. It creates a lot of strain on strategic strain on professional teams because you don't know if she's going jungle or mid, which is a huge, huge difference. Because you don't even have the option to switch lanes to match. If you have a Rumble who goes top and you pick something that's a counter pick to Rumble, in theory, like, some teams might be able to follow that, right? So your mid laner might be able to go top depending on who they pick to try to follow the Rumble if they think they have a really good counter pick. You can't do that when this champion goes into the jungle, when there are very, very few other champions that can be picked mid that also go into the jungle, especially in professional play. Like, Echo can do that. Echo can go mid to jungle, but he has almost no presence in pro right now. So, yeah, like one game. So he has virtually no presence in pro, which I don't know why he's not played in pro as much. It seems like he should be okay, but maybe they're just like really strong counter picks that are popular. I don't know. Seems really good in solo queue. But anyways, yeah, this is going to kill her. Because she's already a pretty unsafe early game champion. Doesn't have sustain in her kit, or I don't remember if she does or not. It's not a substantial amount of sustain. And she already clears like fairly slowly. So not only does this slow the time that it takes for her to clear, but she's going to be taking more damage while she does that. And a lot of pro players are going to be taking, early game skirmishing champs. So like your Lee Sins, your Elises. I think I saw like a lot of Chinese players, or more of them, taking like Rek'Sai potentially. Maybe not. Maybe that was in like some scrims that I was watching for the Twitch rivals, but either way, it's going to be some early aggressive junglers that can punish her for being low on her clears. So I think that's the end of her in the jungle. In solo lane, I don't think it's going to matter that much. Now, whether she's being banned because of solo lane or because of jungle, I'm not really sure. I guess we could look and see where she's getting played the most. She's taking Smite 88% of the time. So, yeah, it looks like she's being played in the jungle most of the time. Yeah, 15 of the games she's played in the jungle rather than the mid. So she may not even be that good in pro at the mid lane. I feel like in solo queue right now, she still can be really good if you're good on her in the mid. Now, once again, the win rates aren't amazing on her, but I think she has the potential, if you're really good on her, to be good. So I think this is a good way to do it. If they feel like she's too strong in the jungle, I think this is a good way to do it, because I don't think it's going to matter that much for solo queue, or for mid lane rather. Because she doesn't get attack speed stuff. It's not like Diana where you might get a Nashor's Tooth or something. Like, the attack speed really doesn't matter that much in a lot of your trades. Like, yes, maybe you don't get in one extra auto, and that can matter in early game skirmishes and all ends, but I think a lot of times she kills you in a rotation, like, really quickly anyways with her spells, so the attack speed's probably not going to matter that much. Okay, so dead in the jungle, still viable if you're good on her in mid lane, I think. Okay, now Sona, this is an interesting one. So it's basically giving her personal movement speed. So she personally gets to move 25% extra movement speed. So that's going to allow her to rotate, make it to situations faster, get better back timings, and things like that. Now, I think that only lasts... I don't think that's a permanent 25% when that aura is up, right? I think it's only whenever she presses E. Or is that just like permanent 25? If it's permanent 25%, that's pretty it's pretty strong. Active, yes. So she gains this for 3 seconds. Extended to 7 seconds if she doesn't take damage. I mean, that's a long time. That's not quite long enough to run all the way back to lane with that much movement speed, but that's enough to probably get from bottom river to middle. Because it's on a 12-second cooldown, so it's on a pretty long cooldown. So it's not like it's permanently up, but it's enough to get you where you want to go pretty quickly. So, I mean, that's going to be pretty good on rotations. The aura movement speed, they didn't change that. They thought about changing that on the PvE. That's one thing they didn't do all the way. So maybe this opens up a spot for her. They have to be careful, though, with Sona, because as we saw with the Taric Sona bot lane, was kind of a menace. People didn't like to watch it. A lot of pros didn't like to play it, but that was a really strong innovation last patch. So you got to be careful buffing her. Now, they did take away Klepto, which is a huge, huge deal that may have completely killed this strategy, but I think they are proceeding with caution, and they did change around the gold items, and I'm not sure... I don't know exactly how those differences would play into running Sona Taric bottom. I assume it's worse because I think they changed the gold items to try to stop those types of shenanigans. I think stuff like that's kind of fun to see innovative things in the bot lane, so it's not always AD carry, but people just hate it all the time, whether it's a mage bottom or something weird like Sona Taric or Talia Pantheon or something I think was played for a little bit. I think those things are interesting and fun, but the general community seems to hate them. At least if they stick around for a while and they're not just a novelty, they are something that's actually viable. People tend to get weirded out by that. So we'll see. She might get a 0.5% or a full percent off of this. She's still going to be squishy. She still has bad matchups into Leona and Nautilus, I think, in the early game, and Blitzcrank. So she can still get zoned. But she does scale extremely well. And she's very good at team fighting. And remember, this is a team fight meta. She's particularly good with Misfortune because she has a huge AoE, like pretty big hitbox stun, basically. It's a dance. It forces them to dance, but basically a stun that just lines up perfectly with Misfortune or a Rumble ult or a Jarvan ult. She's like the old school OG Wombo combo support. So if you have a huge team fight comp, she could be really good. She does have some good harassment also in the early game. With her Q, it's, basically pretty much always going to hit on the Frostfang. They did... what did they do on this patch with Frost? Oh, they gave her back the mana regen early on, which is actually pretty big because she is a mana hog early, or that was last patch. She is a mana hog, and she does get Athenes, so you do get an extra 10 AP off of Athenes with the 50% regen on Frostfang. So that was pretty nice with her. I don't think she's that far out of the meta. As far as supports go, she's at 50%. That's pretty far out for Sona. Sona historically is almost always like a 53 to 55%. She's usually up there with Janna, but all of them are kind of down a lot just because, well, I mean, there are several reasons, but a lot of it is because some of the hard engaged champs early on can be a little difficult to deal with. But anyways, nice buff, maybe 0.5% to 1% up. I could be wrong. I mean, this could completely change the game for her and make her like very, very strong. Because it allows her to match rotations. But the fact that she is still squishy, yes, she can rotate, but if she gets caught by the jungler, by the enemy support or whatever, she's still going to die. She has no mobility, like no dashes, I should say, to get around walls and things like that, or to jump to allies like Braum, like Rakan, things like that. So, we'll see. Good. I like it, though. I like that they're giving the enchanters some attention here. It's good. Okay, Thresh, Bug Fix, doesn't matter, I don't think. Okay, couple of quality of lives. Trundle, I don't think it's going to matter. We're running out of time, so I'm going to go through this a bit faster just because I do want to spend about 10 minutes on Frozen Heart because I want to make my case for why I think that item is probably one of the best, like, underused items. Frozen Domain, it's not going to matter. The main thing with Trundle is he's good when tanks are good. So we're just not seeing that many tanks right now, so you're not going to be seeing that much Trundle. I've seen him in some scrims, but I don't think he's seeing any professional play. I'm trying to watch like more scrims and just like more kind of some higher level play whenever I have the chance. I don't have a ton of time to watch like streams or anything, but just watching some VODs. Or some of these teams that are practicing for Twitch rivals in addition to the pro scene just to kind of get a vibe for everything that's going on out there. But they're playing some stuff that's just like really bad. I think some of them are just like trolling in these scrims. I don't know. It's not consistent with what's being played in pro play. I'll say that, and a lot of times. So I did see Trundle sometimes with that stuff, but it didn't make any sense to me watching it, and I think that it doesn't make a lot of sense now. Because like his big thing is he steals all the stats from tanks and he allows your team to actually kill one of those super tanks. So if they have something like a Sejuani specifically has been very good, because when Sejuani triggers Aftershock and she triggers her passive and he steals those stats, when those stats fall off of her, then she actually used to be able to go into the negatives in terms of resistances. I don't think she can do that anymore, but it could be something that happens. Now, against Leona, maybe, because she actually does get a buff with stats with her W. So if you ult her, she's going to lose those stats also. But the thing is, Leona's bonus stats stick around for like 6 seconds if she hits somebody, I'm pretty sure. So the fight might already be over, or she may have already done her job CCing and killing somebody before you're able to drop her into like really low stats. And his steal actually only lasts for 8 seconds, I believe. So she's going to be able to keep her Eclipse, I think, right, for 3 seconds, does this and this and this. Yeah, she gains an additional 3 seconds if she hits somebody with it. So she's going to keep those bonus stats even for most of Trundle's thing, except for like the last 2 seconds. So I don't know. I mean, maybe if they have Ornn is becoming more popular. He is pretty strong. Like, Trundle can be decent against Ornn. Maybe as a top lane pick. He does have a long range pillar he can use to stop Ornn from headbutting if you time it correctly. So I don't know. Ornn can destroy the Trundle by headbutting it with his Q. So if you try to... I don't know if the goo stays if you destroy the pillar, if like the little surrounding slow stays or not. I've never seen that interaction, but I just don't think it's going to matter. I mean, the 10% movement speed is really nice. That does allow him to run people down, maybe Pillar of Ice. I don't think he's going to be viable as support. Back in the day when he was a support and he was good, it was because Pillar was really strong. It was a much bigger slow and a much, much lower cooldown. It used to be like 11 seconds base, where now I think it's like 16 or 18 seconds base on the Pillar cooldown. So used to basically, when you had like 30 or 40% CDR, you could permanently have a Pillar up. Which was really, really good for support in that meta. Actually, really, really good is a bit strong. It was viable. I don't remember him being like, oh my god, you have to pick ban this champion, but he could have been pretty good. Now, against Nautilus, maybe there's a little more potential because you can throw up a pillar to block Nautilus's hook, because Nautilus's hook is interrupted by terrain. That doesn't work against other hook champions, but maybe against Nautilus, it would help block his hook, so... maybe that's something. But historically, yeah, Sejuani is a popular counter, or Sion if Sion starts coming back, because you can throw a pillar up and block his charge. So that's been something that was popular. Ornn is another interaction that's pretty useful. So maybe we see him as a fighter top lane. Maybe there's some new technology, with Conquer. And I think he does get bonus lifesteal off of his W. No, it's whenever he kills somebody, I think, he gets some extra healing. But I don't know. I don't see him very much, but just kind of the run at them champ and try to kill him. I feel like there just are better options for that, right? Like Darius is super strong and popular right now. Set. I just feel like a lot of the modern champs just have a lot more stuff that's like really useful and will kill you a lot faster. They'll have some kind of true damage or some kind of armor shredding. I mean, with his ult, he does have some degree of armor shredding, but I just feel like they're just going to be better options. So maybe he moves up a little bit. Maybe there are some specific cases against Scion, maybe against Nautilus. I don't know if it's worth it, but that could be useful. Okay, Ziggs getting some bouncing bomb buff. Okay, probably not going to matter. He's still really vulnerable, really squishy. He is a good poke champion, but I feel like if you want something like that, Xerath's probably just going to be better. Satchel Charge is cool. They need to lower the cooldown on this, really double down on the demolition. And the Minefield's okay. Adding an extra slow is all right. So I don't know his exact win rate, but I feel like he's just not that good. They need to really give him a unique niche to where there's just a reason to pick him over another poke champion. I talked about this a lot. Actually, that was in a video the one I didn't release. But basically, they need to make it to where his Satchel Charge is a lower cooldown, make it 16 to 12 seconds instead of starting off at like some obscure number. I think they did lower the cooldown on it. I think it's like maybe 18 to 20 seconds. But they need to make it even lower than that. And what they need to do is like allow you to activate it mid-air. So when you're throwing it, he can press the button and it blows up mid-air and can displace people like easily. So you could throw it and like knock people back into you a lot easier, or you could throw it and knock enemies away easier. And you need to make it to where it can blow back allies too. I think that would be interesting. So you could save an ally potentially who's like stuck in a dragon pit, like your Lee Sin goes in, steals the dragon, but he doesn't have his ward hop anymore. So you could just like throw your Satchel Charge in there and blow him back across the pit. How cool would that be? That would be so much fun, wouldn't it? But right now he can only blow himself back with the Satchel Charge, himself and enemies. So if you could blow allies back, I think that would be cool. Now there would be some troll potential where people could screw that up, obviously, but I think the mechanic is really cool. People said the same thing about Tahm Kench, right? Being able to eat your allies. Oh, people are just going to troll with that all the time. You're just going to eat your allies to screw them up. And Tahm Kench has become one of the most iconic supports over the last 3 or 4 years. Love him or hate him, that ability right there and the interaction with allies is super strong. So having something where you could save allies with Satchel Charge, I think would help a lot. Especially, I'm thinking support, obviously. That would make him really fun. And just blowing back stuff just for big outplays, like Lee Sin's trying to go in with his Q, you blow him out midair with your Satchel Charge. Throw it at him, blow him up. Zack's trying to engage, blow him out of the air. Tristana's trying to jump away, blow him out of the air. So I think we need more displacements in the game because I think those are fun and lead to really big plays, and it allows for skillful counters to a lot of the mobility creep that's happened over the last 3 or 4 years, right? Where every champion has 5 different dashes. What's the solution to that? Well, displacements, I think, are a really good solution. You can go with kind of the hardline solutions, just kind of the aura stuff like Poppy that just stops things from moving. But I think more like, and there is some skill to activating Poppy's W and timing it correctly, but more stuff where you're throwing a projectile to knock people out of the air, I think would be really fun. So that's the direction I would take with him. I would lower the cooldown on this, like I said, to 16 to 12, maybe even 12 to 8, and just make it to where it doesn't do a ton of damage, but it does allow for those really cool outplays. And I really like that you can demolition turrets as well. That'd be cool if you could demo other stuff too with it, like if it blew up player-made terrain. I think that could be interesting, so you could use it to like counter Jarvan, for example, like throw it into a Jarvan ult and have it blow up that terrain. I think that would be really fun. Or like blow up Trundle wall or like an Ornn thing. Like it wouldn't come up all the time, but that would allow for some more cool uses of Satchel Charge too. So I think they should balance around Satchel Charge. I think that makes him unique. The reason that they can't buff him otherwise a lot of times is because of, like, in the past, he's been really toxic, especially with the minefield. Just too much wave clear. He just leads to really defensive play and drags games out for an extra 10 minutes. Kind of like he's got a Nivea-itis. That's why Nivea, it's really hard to buff her, too. Because they just have such good wave clear that it just draws games out. So, I don't know. Interesting buff. Not the direction I would take it. I really hope someday they catch on and buff Satchel Charge more. They are buffing the knockback distance. So just to clarify, you can do that stuff. You can knock people back out of the air and things like that. But the Satchel Charge actually has to be on the ground. I'm pretty sure. Revealing areas, exploding after 4 seconds, or upon reactivation. I don't think you can activate it midair. I'll have to test it. If you can, that's a huge outplay potential that a lot of people haven't really been exploiting. But I think it has to be on the ground. So it's like a Gragas barrel. But I think it would be much more fun if you could reactivate it midair. And that would distinguish it from Gragas barrel too. Give you a lot more control over how you activate it. Okay, the last couple of things, and this is lasting longer than I thought it would. Because these are probably the most important things, and now I've only got 5 minutes left. So I guess we'll take like 10 minutes for it. But the Cloak of Agility nerf, pretty big nerf. Now, I will say they are keeping the other stuff. They are keeping 25% crit on Zeal, which is important. And they are keeping 25% crit on all of the completed items. So like the Phantom Dancer, the Rapid Fire Cannon, things like that. They are keeping the Stormrazor 25% crit. So they aren't reversing everything they did in the preseason. But they're taking this down to 20%. And the big reason they're doing this is because they're saying it was confusing people whether they should get Crit Cloak or whether they should get Pickaxe. I think it's a really interesting choice to just think about which components you want to get. Because AD Carry is, I'm pretty sure it's the least, it has the least options in terms of itemization. You pretty much, whoever your AD Carry is, they're going to have a set number of like the set items they get almost every single game. You might have some differentiation, like some flexibility in like your defensive slot, maybe your third or your fourth item. Do I get a Phantom Dancer? Do I get like a Hex Drinker? Do I get a Guardian Angel or something like that? But by and large, it's going to be pretty like cut and dry what you're getting most of the time on most AD carries. So I like the fact that you actually had some choices early on. But they were trying to mitigate. There were some people that were just stacking a lot of Crit Cloaks, like just getting Infinity Edge, stacking 3 Crit Cloaks, where if you go back and look at my preseason patch, I said that could be a thing, and then other people didn't figure out for a month and a half. So if you watched my video, you would have figured that out, and you could have gotten a lot of elo while other people didn't know about it. But same was true with Soraka, who was a real terror in the preseason. She was awesome for a couple of months there. But anyways, they're dropping down 20%, so it's only when it's a component. It's not when you turn it into Zeal, and you turn it into Zeal pretty quickly. I think Zeal's 1,400, so you're only going to be sitting on it for like 600 gold potentially. So like one back, you're going to have 5% less crit. So not a massive deal. A lot of people will start with BF Sword or Pickaxe anyways, so a lot of times you may not even have a loose Crit Cloak. You might just be able to flat out finish your Infinity Edge if you go for BF Sword Pickaxe. Just straight up finish it, or finish your Stormrazor or whatever. So it will matter in some circumstances, but I think that it's not going to matter too much because they kept it on Zeal and they kept it on the completed items. So it'll hurt the crit champs a little bit, but most of them will have other options like the Pickaxe, like they say there in the build. So not going to be a huge deal in the very early game, although depending on your back timings, might be a little bit of a bigger deal around 10 minutes or so when you're trying to start working towards completion of your first item. Okay, Frozen Heart. Well, let me talk about Stormrazor first, then I'll hit Frozen Heart because I have a lot to say about Frozen Heart. This might be a big deal. We'll see. Is it overperforming? Is it OP? Because when I'm looking at ADCs in most of my games, I feel like a lot of them are not the all-stars of the game. There are some. There are, like, the really good ADCs can take off. We did have some good ADCs over the last couple of days. But I feel like just looking at the win rates, and once again, you got to take it with a grain of salt, but looking at the win rates, like, a lot of them are not that far over the line, right? Like, Senna's at 53. Okay, she's doing pretty well. Miss Fortune's at 53. But then you start going down pretty quickly. You got Jhin and Jinx are like 51.5. And then you start getting into Ashe, who's like 50 and change, right? And then before you know it, you're at like 50 and sub 50. Like, there are a lot of the ADCs. Look how many ADCs are sub 50. That's a lot. Like, Caitlyn's at 50, Aphelios is basically at 50. But I would say, I don't know, offhand, it feels like a third to a half, maybe 40% of the ADCs are under 50%. So I don't really think a lot of AD carries. And if you look at the champs that are dominating here. The Senna and the Miss Fortune. They don't get Stormrazor most of the time. Maybe sometimes Miss Fortune gets it. but like that's rare. I think most of the time you go Essence Reaver, Infinity Edge. So yeah, the two most oppressive ADCs by a large margin, by over 1%, like 1.5%, do not get that item. Jhin gets it, yeah, but like Jinx, I don't think gets it. She's gonna go Infinity Edge Hurricane, right? Ashe is not gonna get it. Kog'Maw's not gonna get it. Twitch isn't getting it. Vayne's not getting it. Caitlyn might get it. I feel like Aphelios doesn't get it either. So you're telling me this item is oppressive when literally one champion who's over 50% gets it on a consistent basis. One champion. Caitlyn is like at 50% and she gets it. But she's at 50 flat. So like one or two champions maybe get it out of the, you know, however many champions there are here, like the 50. Now a lot of these are like really low pick rate, like Tahm Kench, you know, Veigar, Talia. These are like super low pick rate champs, but I don't think it's oppressive. I think that many more ADCs start off with either Essence Reaver or Infinity Edge than they do Stormrazor most of the time. And I mean, some of the weakest champions, like Kai'Sa and Xayah, are the champions that might be most likely to start off, you know, with Stormrazor. And those are like in a really weak spot right now. So I don't really get the reasoning here. And this might actually hurt Kai'Sa quite a lot because I don't know her breakpoint. She's already having a hard time. That -5 AD might change her transformation timing, so she may not be able to transform on time. So we'll see. I don't like it. It's just going to be like the rich getting richer. I don't think... The good news is I don't think it's going to matter for most AD carries, but it is going to matter for Jhin, and it is going to matter for maybe Kai'Sa. But anyone else, probably not going to matter that much, honestly. Okay, so Frozen Heart. This is an item that I really overlooked for a very long time because it has been nerfed. If we look at kind of the history of Frozen Heart, over time, this was, if you don't remember this icon, this was like the go-to item for years and years and years. You would pretty much, as a support, you would get Frozen Heart and what's now called Locket of the Iron Solari, which at different times was called Bulwark of the Legion or just Aegis of the Legion, when that used to be a full completed item. This item dominated for a long time. Let's see here. When did they start nerfing this? Okay, so Season 4, they nerfed it from 20% to 15%. They increased the armor a little bit. They did decrease the cost a little bit. So it's gone through a bunch of different iterations, and it's kind of disappeared from a lot of radars for many, many years. And a lot of this has been... the Ziggs item has come out and just has superseded it, right? So this just hasn't been relevant. It's a little expensive for a support item, and there's just been other items that have overshadowed it, most notably Ziggs, but there have been some other items that people just prefer in that tank slot. But I think a lot of this has just been, it's been overlooked. So the combined cost is 700. Especially in the last, I guess it's been a couple of years. I felt like they buffed this last year a little bit, but maybe, I guess it's been a while. Back in Season 7, they gave it a little nudge. So they've given it 20 extra armor since I last looked at this thing. But I had thought that they nerfed the aura radius on this. They never did. They nerfed Abyssal Mask and Abyssal Rod, I think was what it used to be called. Abyssal Scepter. They nerfed both of those quite a bit back in the day. But they left Frozen Heart alone. And so this item is actually very, very efficient. And the fact that they have nerfed Ziggs several times, I think a lot of people just been sleeping on this item. Because if we look here, right, especially after these buffs on this patch, it's 121% gold efficient, 122%, not including the cripple. And this cripple right here, just because we're running out of time, I'll save you the math on it. This thing is worth at least 400 gold, okay? And I say at least because cripples, it's like, it involves a lot of math, but basically, it does more than just canceling out the attack speed, right? It applies to, I don't know if it's going to say here, reduce attack speed for the duration. Does it say it up here with attack speed? Under notes. unless they change this, back in the day, this is how it was, and you just really had to dig through and just understand. I think it might be under attack speed. Let me just look really quick since I want to make this point. Okay, blah, 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 blah. One attack every 5 seconds. Okay, so max attack speed, blah, blah, blah. Start with a base attack speed that's different from their attack speed ratio. Okay, obtained level up items. Da-da-da-da-da. Attack speed stacks additively. Okay. I'm trying to see if it says anything about cripples here. Base attack speed. Calculating. So, it gets into a lot of math here. Altering the attack speed cap. Fixed attack speed, reducing the attack speed cap. Attack speed is scaling, increasing attack speed. Conditional attack speed, champion abilities, user only. Decreasing attack speed. Okay, they did change it. Okay, so reduction stack multiplicatively rather than additively, so they do not stack as favorably. And take percentages, so when you're getting bonus attack speed, it stacks additively, so like 1 plus 1 is 2, versus stacking multiplicatively. Can be good, can be better in some circumstances, but I guess it's hard. Well, I don't know. It's not, you're not going to be stacking cripples a lot of the time, so it's not going to matter like that much. I think it might actually be better in some cases to stack multiplicatively, but sometimes it's not as good when you have the multiplicative stacking when you're reducing things. So like when you're reducing attack speed, and the main thing is they don't want it to ever go to 0. So for instance, when you're getting like if you're thinking like cooldown reduction of 20%, and then, or cooldown reduction of 25% for an easy number, and then you have a fully stacked ulti hunter of 25%. If that stacks multiplicatively, and I don't remember if that stacks additively or multiplicatively, it depends. But let's say those stacked multiplicatively, you would first reduce it by 25%. So if an ability had a 1 second cooldown, it would go down to 0.75, and then that 0.75 would get reduced by 25%. So that would only take it down 15 instead of taking it down the full 25%. So the final result would be 0.6 seconds cooldown on that ability instead of 0.5 seconds. So stacking multiplicatively on the way down is actually way worse than stacking additively on the way down. But it does say, so it changed it. They changed this back in the day, and I don't want to hunt down when they changed this. But basically, it looks like it does cancel out, because now it says it applies after all... after everything has been added. It used to apply first to the base attack speed before everything else was added to it. So it was a lot worse back in the day. Off the final attack speed value after all bonus attack speeds been factored in. Okay, so they changed it. But nevertheless, it still is going to be a really good stat. But that does make it a lot easier to calculate. So it's just a flat one-on-one ratio with attack speed items. So a dagger is 12% and costs 300 gold. So you have... this over here. So it's an extra, it's an extra 25% then, so 25% is going to be like, what, 60 or something-ish? Let me see. Remind me later. Okay, so 300 times 1.25... 375. Okay, so it's 375 value. So it's canceling out 375 gold worth of attack speed. So if you look at this, the base number here is 3293, which is already 121% efficient, and it's 700 range. That's further than almost every auto attack range. So in a fight, you're gonna get at least 3 people. There are some mages that can hover outside of this range and cast their spells, right? Depending on how the team fight's going. But let's say you even get 3 people in this range. So 375 times 3, that's an extra 1125 gold, right? So we do 1125 plus, I'm doing it on my phone here. I would pull up the calculator, but I don't know. It might pull up some personal information there, like my name, where I work, stuff like that. I'm not sure what's going to show up in that search bar. But if we have this, 1125 plus 3293 equals 4418 divided by the original cost, which is 2700, and it's 164% efficient. 164. Now that's only if 3 people are close by. If you get the full 5 people are close by, it's going to get close to 200% efficiency. That is very, very efficient for a tank item. And efficiency is just how much gold you're getting out of it. So it's something, if you're paying 2,700 and something's only 100% efficient, you're only getting 2,700 gold. But if it's 200% efficient, you're getting an extra 2,700 gold off of that. So if something were 200% efficient, that means you basically get 9 kills worth of gold in power. So that's really, really good. It's like you basically get like almost a double pentakill whenever you buy the item if a kill was worth 300 personal gold for you. So that's very good. So cost efficiency matters a ton on most items. Now sometimes it's difficult to calculate that, and sometimes you have to take inefficient things on damage dealers. But in general, apples to apples, if you're looking like tank item versus tank item, or support item versus support item, or, you know, offensive item versus offensive item, efficiency is a very good measure of power for a lot of items. So this thing, you know, in a basic scenario is going to be at least 150% efficient, and in a really good team fight scenario is going to be close to 200% efficient. Let's check out Thornmail, for example. From the top lane. How efficient is this? Oh, 74%. 74%. Now, yes, it does. If someone attacks you, then you do get the cripple on them, right? So that's the same thing as Frozen Heart. But they have to actually hit you, right? What if they're not hitting you? If you're the super tank, what if they're not hitting you, right? What if they're attacking your AD carrier or somebody else? It's not going to be a reduction. So they can control that. They can't control Frozen Heart. Frozen Heart always just works, right? And yes, it does apply grievous wounds, and there is value in that. But is there enough value to justify, you know, this only having 74% base? Remember, Frozen Heart has 122 base, not including the aura. This is like almost 50% less efficient, even if we're not including either one of the auras on either item. So that's rough. But now it gets even more interesting if we start comparing it to Glacial Shroud. So if you're thinking about supports, and most people on my channel probably are, this is where it gets really interesting. So this item has been nerfed numerous times over the last couple of years. It's only 100% base efficient. That's not great. That's not great. However, it does have a very tricky and difficult to calculate passive, okay? So you are getting bonus on-hit magic damage on somebody. Now, this is very confusing. I actually have a video called The 12 Most Confusing Items in League of Legends Explained in Depth. I'm pretty sure this made the cut, so go watch that if you want more details, or if you want to know about Ardent Censer, Gensus, or whatever. I explain a lot of the trickiest items in the game. But this is tricky because it says 30% bonus magic damage. You're like, yeah, that's awesome. But for some reason, they just decided to make this over 2 seconds. Why would you do that? In most scenarios where you're buffing somebody, they're going to be attacking, like, consistently, not doing light poke damage when you activate this. But what this really means is it's only 50% efficient on hit, and then they burn over 2 seconds. So if you keep reapplying this debuff, then it's really only 15% bonus magic on hit damage. And you might be wondering, well, what is that worth? Okay, on hit damage, when you look at a bunch of other items like Wit's End and things like that, is 25 each. I think. Let's just look at Wit's End to double check this, since we're already pretty deep in the hole here. We're over time, but whatever. I'm just gonna get the depth here. So Wit's End is kind of the standard here for magic on hit damage. I guess I mean, you could look at like the Hex Tech items, because those do, but that's like burst damage. This is consistent. You attack a lot and you get bonus on hit damage. So it tells you here, I think it'll tell you 15 on hit damage. Okay, so 375, so we can figure this out. You do 375. It'll tell you actually what the base is here, I think. Oh, it just tells you the on hit. But it's already done all the calculations on this site for the on hit. for the valuation of a lot of stats. So 15 on hit, so 375 divided by 15. I think it's 25, right? It is 25, yeah. So it's 25 base. So if you do 25, you're getting 15. Well, it's 15%. So let's say your AD carry has 100 AD kind of in the early to mid game when you have this. We'll just say 150. Let's give them a lot. Let's say they're getting a BF sword and a couple of other things. They're rushing a big ticket item early on, which I guess is pretty normal. They're doing 15% on hit damage most of the time. So that would be 0.15 times 150. It's going to be 23 roughly. So we'll do 23 times 25. So that's 575 gold value. Even if you want to go hard, like let's say, okay, they have 200 AD, right? So that's 200 AD. Let's do 200 times 0.15 is going to be 30 times 25 a pop, 750 gold value. So you're getting 750 gold value off of this. Remember that each person that gets touched by a Frozen Heart aura, you're gaining 365. So this is equal to 2 people being touched by a Frozen Heart aura. Is what this passive is going to be equal to, just in terms of how much damage you're giving your AD carry. And that's something that's pretty much guaranteed. You activate this, your AD carry is going to attack people. You're probably going to get full value out of that. You're probably going to get your 750 gold if they have 200 AD. If they have 100 AD, it's going to be half that, 375. So basically every 100 AD that they have is equal to 1 person being touched by Frozen Heart. In terms of gold valuation. Now, you do apply a slow personally. Now, this one's more difficult to quantify. You do apply a slow, and if your AD carry does attack somebody, you do 40 magic damage per second to nearby enemies. So that does add up. That's 40 on-hit damage, basically AoE, potentially to multiple targets. It is a pretty small hitbox on it. I don't know if it says what it is. It's pretty small. It's unlikely you're going to get multiple people in that, right? It's like basically melee range, like maybe 200 radius on it, maybe even less than that. It's very, very small. So it's unlikely that you're going to hit multiple people with it. But if you stick on them the entire time, still doing the, basically 40 magic damage per second, that's 400 total damage. So it's, I don't know if you'd call that on hit. If you do call it on hit and they stay in it the entire time, you would get 1,000 gold out of it. Okay? It is unlikely they're going to stay in there for the entire 10 seconds and you're going to do all of that damage. Now, you are applying a slow as well, to that person, so that does give you quite a bit of value. The 40% slow is going to make it difficult to run around. But just think about the types of champions and the kinds of fights that are going on with this, right? So if you have someone like Nautilus or someone like Leona, they already have a crap ton of CC, right? You're not getting away unless you use a flash or a dash anyways from these champions. They have so many ways to stay attached to you. Nautilus is going to be applying a constant slow with his E, and then he's got his hook. He has his auto attacks. He's going to be sticking on you most of the time. Leona has like a 5-second cooldown on her stun. Her E is on a really low cooldown once you get some points into it. So she's going to be sticking on you. So yes, you are gaining this slow. Rakan is not going to be staying in combat. Rakan's the big case, and I play a lot of Rakan. And I'll tell you, you're not staying in there most of the time. Like, you're not going to be, like, engaging into a 5v5 and sitting there, like, auto-attacking in melee range for multiple seconds to get this. Like, you're going in, you're engaging, and you're trying to get the hell out of there before you die. Most of the time, because you can get blown up. And you need to be going back and peeling your AD carry in a lot of instances anyways, applying shields to people. So someone like Rakan definitely, I think, doesn't get as much value out of this as someone like Leona or Nautilus. Now, the Leona and Nautilus, the 40 extra damage, if you're staying close, that does add up. That is really useful. But if we have 750 here, let's say that you're in there for half that duration. So you're getting, let's just call it 20 on hit damage or whatever. We'll just call it 25. So that's an easy 625 value. So it was 750 plus 625. Once again, super loose math on that, but just to give us some valuation, because it's very difficult to calculate all that stuff up. So that right there is going to be 1375 total value that you're getting off of these passives. that's, you know, the slow is kind of whatever. You are getting some value off of that too. So let's just call it 1,500. Just easy math here. 1,500 value off of those passives, plus the original 23, 56, 38, 56 divided by whatever the original is, 22, 50. 171% efficient. So even in like the best case scenario, you're actually sticking on the person, doing a lot of this damage. Your AD carry has 200 AD. You're sticking on them the entire time, like for 5 seconds on this target. They don't dash away or flash away or, you know, whatever. They're not just dead. You don't just kill the person instantly when you CC them, which that happens a lot with Leona and Nautilus, right? You hit them with the CC, one person's dead. Right, that's it. That person's dead in like 1 second flat. Everyone focus fires him. Now you're just kind of walking around with this aura around you, not touching anybody. I think that's one of the more common scenarios. So, given like the best case scenario and super generous valuations, this is still only 171% efficient. You know, if you're touching 3 people with your Frozen Heart, you're going to get more than that, right? If you're touching 5, you're definitely getting more than that. So, even in like the absolute best case scenario, Ziggs is still not that much more competitive than Frozen Heart. Frozen Heart would have to be having a really bad day, and Ziggs would be having to have a really good day for Ziggs to outshine Frozen Heart in a lot of scenarios. And Frozen Heart, the thing is, it just works. It's all the time, any fight, anywhere, it's working, right? Ziggs is so conditional, you know. It has a cooldown on it, the cooldown of your ult, so it's just like not working a lot of the time. You're not getting value out of it. And then, like I said, people die a lot of times instantly, so you're not going to get a lot of value out of the Frostfire Covenant, or if you're Rakan, you have to leave anyways. They could dash or flash out of something, and you're not getting any value out of that. Maybe you're skirmishing and you're roaming, and there's like a mage or something. You're roaming to make a play mid lane with your Syndra. You're about to use your ult. You just put the Ziggs on her just for the hell of it anyways. She's not getting any value out of this on hit hardly because she's not going to have any like AD, so you're losing value there. So there's just a lot of like real world scenarios where you're not getting the best hypothetical value out of this item most of the time. And like I said, even in those scenarios where you are getting a lot of value, it still is not matching up to Frozen Heart. Now you could say, well, if you're going to say that, then, you know, when you're Frozen Hearting their Syndra, you're not getting the full 375 value out of that anyways because she doesn't get a lot of attack speed. It's like, yeah, but they're still going to auto attack. Right, like mages are still going to auto if they're good at all. They're still going to be auto attacking people. Like you're still getting some value. So yeah, maybe if they have a huge like, you know, AP comp or something like that with a lot of mages, maybe you're not getting full value out of it because the attack speed doesn't matter as much. But nevertheless, I think the number of scenarios where you're going to be getting closer to max value out of Frozen Heart are a lot better than the scenarios where you're going to be getting max value out of Ziggs Convergence. And if they're both having bad scenarios, then Frozen Heart's just going to be a lot better because its baseline efficiency is 122 instead of 100. So I think it stacks up decently favorably. Now, to speak to Ziggs, though, it is cheaper. It's $22.50. Frozen Heart is $2,800, which does suck. It does have more well-rounded stats, so it does have some magic resist, it has some armor on it, it has some cooldown reduction, versus Frozen Heart is more extreme. Frozen Heart is going to be way, way better against heavy AD comps, like not even close against heavy AD comps, which are super popular right now. If you look at most team comps, I would say at least in 60 or 70% of my games, it's just random number, but it feels like it's all the time, it's going to be like one mage in the middle, something AD in the jungle, and then something AD top most of the time, right? Or it's like 50-50 in the worst case scenario. Maybe it's an Echo jungle or something like that. But almost always when you look at top, middle, and jungle, you know, one or two of those, often two of those positions are going to be AD, which means that a lot of teams are tilted towards AD. And that means this armor is just insanely strong. Like, it's very, very good. You also get 20% cooldown reduction on this, which is massive because your gold item doesn't give you cooldown reduction anymore. So it's actually pretty hard to get to 40%. A lot of rune builds are also not including Transcendence anymore because that tree was nerfed so much that it just doesn't have a ton of a ton of use there. So, I don't remember what I was saying. I kind of zoned out there for a second. But anyways, the CDR is very, very good. Yeah, oh, the Transcendence. Yeah, it's been nerfed so much. Like, Scorch was nerfed. Absolute Focus was nerfed. Just everything with Nimbus Cloak. That was one thing with Rakan. Sometimes some people would get the old Nimbus Cloak before the rework, plus Transcendence. That build doesn't really work anymore. Nimbus Cloak is not as good because you have to expend a summoner for it, which is not that great on Rakan. So, no one's getting Transcendence. So, it's just a lot harder to get to that CDR. And this is one of the fastest ways to get to 20% CDR without building like two components of like non-matching components of an item. So yeah, you can build like Glacial Shroud plus Forbidden Idol or Glacial Shroud plus Kindle Gem. I don't like those kind of builds. It does give you faster CDR, but it slows down the completion of your big ticket items. And those are usually going to have some of the most power in the game. So getting this is faster than getting a lot of other stuff out there. So if you were to do like Ziggs plus Forbidden Idol, which is a very common build path, for example, you would have to have 3150 gold to get that 20% CDR. Versus at 2700 here, you would have the 20% CDR. Or if you do Ziggs plus Kindle Gem, same deal. It's going to be 3150 gold. So even if you do like Shirelia's, like rush something like a Shirelia's, which is one of the cheapest items in the game, rush Shirelia's, then go Forbidden Idol, that's still going to be 2850. So this is one of the fastest ways you can get to 20% CDR. And all of those like high profile champions right now love CDR, right? Rakan loves it. He has a super powerful abilities that are on fairly long cooldowns. Nautilus, same deal. Leona, same deal. Pretty much every support's going to love CDR a lot, especially these hard engaged supports, because you can use those ults on cooldown to make a play, make something happen, be proactive, push your advantage. So the CDR is very good. Versus CDR, like on someone like Qiyana, it's good, but because you're so reactive a lot of the times, you're going to be sitting on your ult for decent stretches of time. It's not the type of ability where it's like, oh, my ult's here, okay, I'm going to flash in and make a play. At least most of the time, you shouldn't do that on Qiyana. So, yeah, it's on the proactive champs, the ones that start fights, which are, like, the most popular and some of the strongest champs right now. That CDR is really good. So, I think Frozen Heart, a lot of people are going to be downplaying this, saying, oh, who cares? Frozen Heart's not that good. I was playing it a lot last week, and it was really, really good. It was surprisingly a lot better than I thought it would. Also, with Ziggs, you don't fully rely on your with Ziggs, you're so reliant on your AD carry to not be bad or to be good, right? If your AD carry is 0-4, like, which happens a lot more than, I would like for it to happen, to put it kindly, a lot of times, then it's just not going to be that good. And there are certain AD carries that just don't auto-attack that much, that don't get a lot of value out of Ziggs. Something like Ezreal, right? Not going to get a lot of value out of Ziggs. So, anyways, that's my case for Frozen Heart. I think this is one of the biggest sleeper items right now in the game. Just a lot of people have completely overlooked and have just forgotten about this item. And it's so strong compared to the other tank items. Now, I don't remember when they did this, but Frozen Heart hasn't been changed in years, but I remember they did nerf all of the tank items. I think it was back in Season 7 or something. And I think a lot of people just haven't recalibrated since they nerfed Randuin's, and all of those other like big tank items. They're just really inefficient now. They're just bad in a lot of scenarios, right? Like this is like 85%. Dead Man's Plate, 85%, I think. 80%. Even when the movement speed is fully stacked, when you're just zipping around the map super fast, it's only 105% efficient. It's terrible. It doesn't have an aura. It doesn't have anything that team fights. Now, at least Randuin's has Cold Steel, and it does have the slow on it, but a lot of these items, people just mindlessly pick them because the guides tell them to pick them. And I think a lot of coaches and pro players, even, potentially, as smart as they are, as awesome as they are, they've just forgotten that Frozen Heart is an item. And it's really good. So anyways, that's my case for Frozen Heart. Try it out. See what you think. It could be really strong. That's going to be it for this video. They are making Rift. The final thing I forgot to mention. They are making Rift easier to kill. That's nice. It's a good gesture. I still think everyone's going to camp bottom and go for dragons. But it is going to provide a little bit more counterplay if you want to get those early Rift Heralds. So that is useful sometimes. One final thing in the bug fixes as well is that if you sell a gold item, then you're not going to be able to buy another gold item shortly there. Like, you can't basically stack up your Relic Shield and then switch over to Frostfang later on. You have to stack each one and then keep each one. You can't switch it out. I never did that. I know some people in chat said that was something that they were doing or some higher level people were doing, but I just never really took advantage of it that much. So I don't think it's going to matter for the vast majority of players. But if you did that, that exploit's not going to work as much. Okay, so much longer video than I intended on these patch notes. I just really wanted to make the case for Frozen Heart. Hopefully at least a couple of people watched till that part of the video. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and we'll see you right next time.